Welcome everyone and thank you for joining me. My name is Morag Matthews and I'm one of the professional services consultants here at Wolters Kluwer Tax and Accounting in the UK. I'm also the personal tax specialist for the professional services department, and my background is tax practice, having formerly worked in the profession for over 25 years. In today's webinar, we're going to cover the changes to Entrepreneurs Relief, or as it's now known, Business Asset Disposal Relief, the tax overpaid field and tax return error coming up as object reference, which some of you may have seen appearing when you run the tax return bundle letters. Then we'll look at the import from accounts production to the partnership tax return. And we'll also look at the expiry of the digital tax account authorization. We'll go on to look at online filing synchronization error, and then we'll look at when the tax return gets locked or you're getting a message to say that all licenses are in use. And then lastly, we'll look at the community group posts. There's a lot of information on there that is fairly new, and I'm very pleased to be able to share that with you. The webinar will last approximately 1 hour, and there'll be some time at the end of the session for you to ask your questions, but please feel free to send these through using the webinar GoToMeeting panel as we're going along. You'll see on the screen the aims and objectives of this webinar. I'm going to cover some items showing how to get the most out of the CCH personal tax software. As previously mentioned, we'll look at changes to Entrepreneurs Relief, ways of improving efficiency by getting rid of some of the errors and issues that pop up on the screen. We'll look at the import from accounts production to partnership tax returns, and also using the community group area. Okay, let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the changes to Entrepreneurs Relief. So since the budget on the 11th of March, the relief has reduced from 10 million to 1 million pounds for all qualifying disposals on or after the 11th of March, and it's been renamed, as I say, to Business Asset Disposal Relief. And this will apply from the tax year 2020/21 onwards. There are some forestalling arrangements that have been introduced where completion date on the transaction has been delayed. And these are basically designed to counter transactions attempting to lock in the pre-budget day lifetime limit of £10 million. So if they do apply, they will apply to sales contracts entered into before the budget day with contractual completion after budget day. So the earlier disposal date will still stand, but if ER is claimed, the new reduced amount will apply. So we've introduced a new tick box called Forestalling Arrangements Apply, and this has been added to the full details screen. The screen has also been updated for 2020 onwards to include the pre and post limits, the lifetime limits, and we've also made changes to the order in which Entrepreneurs Relief losses appear. Where there are multiple transactions, including losses, all of which qualify for ER, relating to a specific trade, if that occurs, and these span before and after budget day, the losses are allocated in the most beneficial manner. So I'm just going to jump into Central and show you what I mean by that. So you'll see on screen my client, Mrs. Rosemary Adams, and we're in her Central record. So I'm going to go into her tax return area and look at the 2019/20 tax return. And you can see now that we've got the tax computation on the screen. I'll just pull down the errors and exceptions so you can see a bit more of the screen. And I'm going to go into the capital gains area of the tax return data. So you can see that Mrs. Adams has made a number of disposals, and it's the first one in particular that we want to look at. She's disposed of some farmland. So you can see on the first screen, the total gains are listed, and she's actually claiming £1.1 million in respect of the disposal of the farmland, and she's doing that because the disposal was pre-budget day. So if I click onto the full details button, I'll have a look at a bit more of the detail of this disposal. So the land was sold on the 5th of March 2020. The proceeds were £1.25 million, and the cost was £150,000. So we can see that Mrs. Adams is claiming entrepreneurs relief because there's a tick in the box beside the entrepreneurs relief hyperlink. And if I go into that hyperlink, you can see the reason why she's claiming entrepreneurs relief. She's a member of the Adams Farming Partnership, and that allows her to claim entrepreneurs relief in respect of that trade. So as this disposal is set before budget day, the full £1.1 million will be allowable. However, if it transpires that Mrs. Adams was actually trying to delay or bring forward the disposal date and delay the contractual completion just to claim the 1.1 million, then the forestalling arrangements would apply. So what we would do in this instance, we then tick the box to say that forestalling arrangements apply, which sits just below the Entrepreneurs Relief hyperlink. And then we can save that and go back to the first screen. So when I go back to the first screen, you'll see now the entrepreneurs relief that we can claim is only £1 million because of those rules locking into place. Now, if I go up to the entrepreneurs relief icon on the ribbon bar at the top of the screen, if I click in there, you can see now that we can see the gains after reliefs, and we can see that the qualifying amount is only £1 million. I mentioned a few moments ago that in this screen we can also see the lifetime limit pre 11th of March and the amount post 10th of March being budget day. So I would need to put in here the fact that my client is actually claiming £1 million of entrepreneurs relief in respect to this disposal, which means ordinarily she would have had £9 million left to be relieved, but because the rules have changed, she's in fact used all of the amount for entrepreneurs relief in this instance. So if I just go back to the previous screen and also show you that the farmland, just to remind you, has been listed as other asset. So if I go into the full details, now, normally you would expect this to be shown as land, but we have to include it as other assets. Otherwise, the entrepreneurs relief claim won't come through to the correct boxes on the tax return. Now, this is something that HMRC have insisted on, so that anything qualifying for entrepreneurs relief, it needs to be included as an other asset for the computation to work correctly. Okay, so that's a little bit about the changes on entrepreneurs relief or business asset disposal relief. I'm just going to jump back to my PowerPoint and we'll move on. So the next thing that we're going to look at is the tax overpaid field and the tax return error object reference. Now, what I mean by this is if you've upgraded to the 2020.3 release, and you're using the tax return bundle function, you may be getting a message similar to the one that's on the screen at the moment. So basically it's referring to the business rules within the tax return bundle maintenance area, and it's saying the message is object reference not set to an instance of an object. Now the reason this is happening is because the field tax overpaid no longer exists. So I'm going to jump back into Central, and if we go into a different client, let's look at Mr. Jonathan Adams, for example. So his tax return is complete for 1920, and we're about to use the tax return bundle. I'll just go into his summary so we can have a look at that. And what we need to look at is the letter paragraphs for a field called tax overpaid, and this needs to be replaced. So as you know, if you're using the tax return bundle, the way you set the paragraphs up initially, we go into the maintenance area. So if I go into File and then Maintenance, and then if I scroll down to Tax Settings, into Personal Tax, down to the tax return bundle area, and then we'll look at the letter paragraphs. Now this is looking at them globally, of course. You can go into the paragraphs from an actual client if you need to, but this is where we need to make the change so it applies to everyone on your system. So if I just pull this down a little bit so we can see, we need to go through the paragraphs. Mine are set in a certain way. Yours will be similar to this if you're using the tax return bundle, although it won't be exactly the same. And what we're looking for is the use of the words tax overpaid. Now you see I have changed mine because it is now been replaced with tax overpaid allocated against the first payment on account. So what we need to do is to make sure that we change any instances of the words tax overpaid. To include a field showing a repayment, you can use, for example, total tax, class 2 and class 4 national insurance overpaid, which comes from the SA 100 tax return section. And this will display a repayment figure without brackets, and you can use this field in a business rule to include the paragraph when that value is greater than 0. Now you can see that I've got a couple of business rules on here. If the detail here includes the words tax overpaid, you will need to change that business rule completely. The field will show an overpayment in the main comp, that is before adjustments for payments on account. So this will work for an overpayment caused by too much tax taken by pay as you earn, but it won't reflect a repayment where the payments on account exceed the total tax due. So if you've got a detailed breakdown in your letter, that field could be useful where you want to show the overall tax due or the amount repayable. So what we really need to ask you to do is to review your inserted merge fields and your business rules for any instance of the field tax overpaid. And if by changing it, you're still having problems in the maintenance screen, then you'll need to log a support case with one of my colleagues in CCH support. And what we would need to do is to arrange for your IT team to run through some queries one at a time in the SQL Server Management Studio, save the results and send them to us on a CSV or an Excel file. And that won't contain any of your personal information in respect of your clients, but from that we'll be able to prepare a custom script to remove any mention that's sitting behind the system of the tax overpaid field. So the tick box still works, and we're just reporting the reporting of it behind the scenes that needs adjusting, if that makes sense. So now that the tax overpaid merge field doesn't exist, we really do need to replace it. So if you're not sure what field to use, the field names in reporting are exactly the same. So you can use reporting to interrogate the value coming through, and then you can decide how to change your letter from there. Now, we do have a knowledge-based article on this. It's article number 12992. And you can have a look through that, which basically confirms everything that I've just said, and you can follow the instructions to make a change to this. So I'm still in the maintenance area. If I close that down and I'm in Mr. Jonathan Adams's record, I can click on the tax return bundle once I've changed the paragraphs, and then rather than previewing the whole letter, I can just click on letter paragraphs to see the changes and to make sure that I've achieved my objective to get rid of that field. Okay, just going to go back to my PowerPoint, and we're now going to have a look at the import from accounts production to partnership tax returns. This was fixed in the 2020.3 release. You may have had some trouble doing this. There was an exception being thrown out and the figures weren't coming through. You had to actually come out of the client and go back in. It was just a blip in that particular version, but as I say, it's now been fixed. So what we want to do is to create an accounting period in the partnership tax return, and then we update tax from accounts production. So we push the data from accounts production into the partnership tax return, and then we update from the accounts data into the partnership return. Well, what does that all mean? I'm going to go into Central again, and I'll just close this area down. And I'm going to look at this time, I'm going to look at partnership to show you how this works. So I've got one open here, the Lake partnership, and you can see that I'm now in the central record of the Lake Partnership. So I want to go into the accounts production area. So you can see I've got a set of partnership accounts in here, and the period that I've got is the tax year. Obviously it doesn't need to be the tax year, but whatever the period is, I'm just going to click into that period in accounts production. And this should pull up a trial balance onto my screen. Just takes a few moments to process it. And you can see there I've now got the TB. So the information and the data for the final accounts is sitting here ready to go. I want to push this data into the partnership tax return. Now the way that I do that, I can go up to Tax Link on the taskbar, click into Tax Link, and this should now allow me to see an icon on the ribbon bar called Up-to-Date Tax. So it's a green circle with a white tick in it. So I'm just going to click into that box, and the system asks me, do I want this to be draft? Now I can transfer this through as draft data, but if I'm happy that my accounts are final, I can say no to that, click continue, and it confirms that the update has been completed. So it's telling me that the final accounting data has been pushed through into partnership tax. So I'll just say OK to that, and then close down accounts production. And I'm going to go into Mr. Jonathan Adams summary, the Lake Partnership summary. So I'm back in the central record of the Lake Partnership. I want to now go into partnership tax. So I click on the tax return tab. I've already created a 1920 tax return. So I click into that actual return. Then you can see there's a very short list of tax return data at the moment because we haven't created an accounting period in the 1920 tax return. So the way I can do that is I click onto the business tax hyperlink under the tax return data section. I click here to create my new business, and the business is the Lake Partnership. So as I start to type that in the box, some options appear on the screen. I click the box to say that it's the Lake Partnership that I want to set up the business for. And then bottom right of the screen, I can click on the next button. That will add the details of the partnership, which is already in my database because I'd set the partnership up as a new client. I click next again. I just need to say what the partnership does. Let's just say they're farmers. And click next again. And again, and the business is created. So when I click finish, it now brings the accounting period options up onto the screen. So this version of the software will actually create the return period for me. And because all the partners in my partnership are individuals, I can create a new standard accounting period. There's a number of options here. Obviously, if you've got any corporate partners, non-resident partners, or non-resident corporate accounting periods. So I'm going to just click on the standard one because they're all individuals. And I'm going to say that the period started on the 6th of April 2019 and it ends in 12 months' time. And then bottom right of the screen, I can click finish, and I've now got the boxes waiting for me to pull the information through from accounts production. So all I do at this point is click on the update from accounts icon, which sits on the ribbon bar at the top of the screen. And when I click on that, the system asks me, is this the correct partnership that I'm looking for? I check the date, it matches the tax return period. So incidentally, it doesn't have to match the tax return period, obviously, if the period of account ends in the tax year. I can click on OK, and when I do that, the information gets pulled through from accounts production. So you can see there, I've got my turnover grayed out because it's been pulled through from accounts production and not just keyed in. Check on the expenses. I can see the expenses that have come through. Again, they've been grayed out. And then my balance sheet, which happily balances. And I can then move forward and click on to capital allowances and add any adjustments to continue preparing my partnership tax return. So as I say, that's how you transfer the data. You can push it from accounts production and pull it into the partnership tax return. There is an option to do this automatically. It will depend on the size of your practice whether you want to do that or not. Generally, people that are preparing the accounts and the tax returns might have it set to automatic, but those that aren't, if there's separate departments, it's easier to push and pull, because obviously if it is set on automatic, any changes will overwrite any of the detail that you're adjusting within capital allowances and tax adjustments if the accounts change. So often it's appropriate for the accounts to be finalised and then pull them through to partnership tax return, but it really depends on the policy of your practice. Okay, so that's the importing from accounts production to partnership tax returns. I'm now going to look at the expiry of the digital tax account. So these were set up usually within about 18 months. And once you do have the digital tax account authorized, it will last for another 18 months. So the first thing we need to do is to find your FBI credentials. And I would advise you, because a lot of people are coming to the end of the 18 months now, the revenue have actually changed the questions since the last time you actually needed to authorize this. And we've got no control over that, but what we do recommend is that you reauthorize now rather than waiting until January 2021, when you're all going to be exceptionally busy. Do it now, and then you know it will be set for the following 18 months. Now, if I just click back into Central again, you need to set this in the maintenance area. So what we need to look for, if I just close down a little bit of this partnership to make the screen a little bit clearer, if we go to File and then Maintenance, we're in Tax Settings, and then we go into Personal Tax, and then we go down to Tax System Parameters. And then we can, Tax System Parameters, and then we look for online filing. So you can see when I go into online filing, when it appears on the screen, I've got my user ID and my credentials sitting there. And what I'm looking for is Authorised HMRC Digital Tax Account. So if I click onto the Not Authorised hyperlink and then Authorised Credentials, it will take me to what you'll probably find is quite a familiar screen. You'll be asked, if I just expand that slightly, you'll be asked various questions, and as I say, they have changed the questions, so you're going to need a passport or a P60 or other documents to confirm who you are. You can see that this one is asking for authority for Wolters Kluwer to set up a UK test. I'm not going to go through the procedure because obviously mine's for demonstration purposes only, but if you look at the detail, follow the questions, enter the information from your passport or P60 or whatever documentation you decide to use, follow the instructions, and then you'll be fully authorised to get you through the January filing deadline. Okay, I'm just going to close that. Mine failed, obviously, because I didn't go through the whole process. And let's go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, looking at some other items now. You might find that when you're online and you're trying to file a tax return, a synchronization error might appear. Now, this generally happens when you're trying to generate the IR mark. So there is a way of sorting this out. And if I go back into Central, I'm still in Mr. Adams, I think. Let's go back to him. He seems to be a good example. Let's go into his summary of his tax return, and you'll see that he's got a number of sources of income sitting there. So this is a way of preventing your tax returns from hanging or freezing or crashing when you're trying to generate the IR mark. Now, hopefully this won't happen too often, but if you are getting an error occasionally on synchronization, the way to sort it out is to go into each item of the tax return data. So for example, I'll start with the first one, business tax, and save and close. The fact that my balance sheet doesn't balance doesn't matter in this instance. And then I go down and I go into each of these and save and close all of them. Now you must make sure that you come out of the online filing screen first, and then you open each of the data entry screens that have been populated and save and close. So when you're moving down the list, you do this for every screen until all of the screens have been saved. Now if I just drag the slider down the screen slightly, what sometimes happens is when we get down to the bottom, where we've got tax return disclosure notes, sometimes the screens won't go, it won't allow you to go any further down. But what you need to do is to make sure that any screens further down, such as tax return, other information, and trust settlement income, that you also go in here. This one's locked at the moment, so I'll just unlock that. You also go in here and you save and close so that all of the items on the screen have been saved and closed. That should then allow you to go back into the online filing icon and validate the information and successfully create an IR mark. Now, if it doesn't, if it still fails, which hopefully it won't, you can try exporting and importing the case. So the way we do that, we go into the maintenance area and we go to File and then Import Export. And then you'll see at the bottom of the screen, there's Personal Tax Export and Personal Tax Import. If I go to the Export option, it basically brings up a menu of questions that you just run through. I want to export the client, and on the bottom right of the screen, I go to Next, and I can untick the tax years, just tick the particular one that I want to export, click on the Next button again. You can filter these so that you can export more than one at a time. And then on the Next button, you locate your client on the list and you check the box relating to the client that you want to export. And then you click Next and Browse. And what you do there is you save that file, probably somewhere like on your desktop, and then click Finish. Now, I'm not going to export this client because there's nothing wrong with this one. It's not actually hanging on generating the IR mark. But once you've done that, you've then got the client exported and sitting on your desktop. So then what you would do is to go back in and re-import that particular client's data. So back into File and then Import Export. And this time you would click on the Import section and follow the questions here. So you would click on the file to select which one to import. So obviously you'd bring it back through from where it was saved on your desktop. And then you double click to select it. Now, if there are any errors, this will appear in red, in which case you need to contact support before closing the screen, because obviously we'll need to know what the message says on the screen. But if there are no errors, you just need to click Finish. And if you were following the steps, the error should have cleared, and you'll then be able to then generate the IR mark as you were doing previously. The thing not to do is don't delete the return, because if you're following those steps, what you need to do to clear the error, you need to delete the return and re-import it. So effectively, you've got to delete that return first, but please don't do that until you've confirmed that the import routine works. Because if you do delete, and I'll show you how you do that, if I go back into the tax return, you'll see on the ribbon bar there is a delete tax return icon. You may not have permissions to do that if you're a part of a large tax team, but please do take great care before clicking on that icon, as once you've done it, it can't be reversed, and what we don't want you to do is to lose a lot of your client's tax return data. So when you delete the return, It will also delete the workflow that's attached to it if you're using either a standard or a bespoke workflow for your personal tax returns. So you'll need to reassign this to the tax return after importing it, and then sign it off again up to the point that you got to before you exported and re-imported the client. There is also a knowledge-based article dealing with the online filing synchronization errors, and that's knowledge-based article 6631. So I appreciate I've given you a lot of information in the last couple of minutes on that. So if you do need to look at that, just go to the support tab at the top of the screen, click into the support center, and then you can go to our landing page, click onto the knowledge-based icon, and then all we need to do is to type in 6631. That's the number of the knowledge-based article, and there you can see it's there, CCH personal tax synchronization error when generating the IR mark. It's really useful to go in here and have a look at any of the other errors that might be appearing in respect to the 1920 tax returns, because there is a good lot of detail explaining, and I think on this one, if I just click onto the hyperlink, we'll just wait till it opens. There we are. If I just scroll down the screen, it tells you there exactly how to do it. And if you want to export and then re-import the case, there is another hyperlink which will give you full details of how to go through the export and import process. Okay, I'll just click back into the PowerPoint and we'll just move on. Another situation that you might come across is where the system tells you that the tax return is locked or all licenses are in use. Now you might receive a message saying that all licenses are in use when actually you know that they're not. Or if Central has incorrectly closed or it's crashed, it might be an issue that's then giving the locking error onto the screen. And so you log out and you log back in and there's still an issue, but really you need to check why the issue is there and clear the problem. So if a user, for example, is incorrectly closed or they've crashed out of personal tax or indeed corporation tax as well, it may be holding on to a license even if you've successfully logged back in again. So you need to check how to clear this. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate this at the moment because it will mean coming out of Central and then taking some time to come back in. But basically, the way to sort this out is you close Central on each of the PCs where Central has crashed, and that's to ensure that no data gets lost. And then you right-click on the Windows taskbar at the bottom here. And when you do that, you look for Task Manager, and then you want to select the Processes tab. So Windows 10, I think it's the More Details tab. And you look in the Background Processes section, and if there's an entry in there for Client Framework or CCH Central, you highlight it and click End or End Process. So all you're doing really is using Task Manager as you might do in other applications. You're just closing the option that's on the screen at that point. Then you can relaunch Central on any of the affected PCs. And if some licenses still remain in use, just check on any of the other PCs that might have had Central running previously, and then any locked licenses will then be released. Again, there is a knowledge-based article on how to deal with this situation. It's article number 6191, and that will go through in detail exactly how you do this. There are some screenshots as well so that you can follow it on screen. If you've got a terminal server, you will need to ask your IT people to clear or close the client framework for you, but it should clear in 10 minutes anyway, so it shouldn't give you too much of a problem. Now, the other message that sometimes appears on the screen is if there is another tax return locked. Now, I'll go into Central and show you what I mean by that. Back into Central, let's close down the support center. And we'll just go into the main area of the tax return. Okay, so if it's telling you that another tax return is in use, we need to go into the maintenance area. So we can go into File and then Maintenance, and then we want to move down to Internal. So File, Maintenance, Internal, and then we want the locking tile. Click on the locking tile, and you can see there that's telling me all the clients in my database that have been opened and when they've been opened. So you can effectively click on one of those and close it. So you could actually be throwing someone else out of the system that's trying to operate one of the clients. Sometimes happens, not terribly often, but if it does lock, you can close them down. But what I would say is don't delete the ones on the day that you're doing it. Use the earlier ones and close those first, just in case someone is actually working on a tax return and you throw them out of it. We don't want any of the data being lost. Okay, so that's really the tax return locked or all licenses are in use issue. As I mentioned previously, the knowledge-based article is 6191. Now, I'm just going to move back to my PowerPoint. And now I'd like to talk to you about the customer community. Now, this is new. You may have heard about it already. It's basically for customers to log in, or they might be pre-registered, or they can log a call with support by using this as well. But the idea is to register so that you can receive notifications from Wolters Kluwer. There are a lot of things that you can do in the customer community. The idea is really to ask simple questions. So it's like a round table discussion with other customers. And if you don't get an answer or an opinion from another customer in, say, 48 hours, we'll have a look at it and come back to you. But what you can do, and what I do recommend, is that you join some of the groups on here. So possibly joining the personal tax group and subscribe to all the posts daily, or possibly at least up until February 2021. We'll be adding new hints and tips to this and frequently asked questions in the next few months. And I would encourage your colleagues to also subscribe for it so that they can get the most up-to-date information. So let me just show you a little bit about how it works. I'm just going to click back into Central. It's not liking that. Back into Central, that's better. Apologies for that. Okay, so I'm back into Central. And if I go up to the Support tab at the top of the screen, in here you can see you would ordinarily come in here and go into the Support Center or into the online help. We've got a new icon here called Customer Community. If I click onto that, it will bring some options and some tiles up onto the screen, and you can see them all there. And what we need to do is I'm going to log into this. I'm going to click on the login button at the top. And when I log in, I would normally put in my username and password. But as you can see, as I'm an employee of Wolters Kluwer, I can log in at the bottom here. So I'm just going to put my details in here. And that should take me into Customer Community. So there we go. So I've now logged in. Same tiles are on the screen. We've got the Community Frequently Asked Questions. If I click onto this hyperlink, it will take me into the area where the questions are posed. And you'll see that it gives you a lot of detail about how to access the customer community, how you log in, if your details are correct, how do you join a group. And you can basically see here as I scroll down, it tells you how you find out your practice code and registration code so that you can start using this area. And then you can ask a question about a product, and this will sit on the screen and you can see who's asked the question and what the answer is going to be. Customers raise questions for other customers to help effectively, and that's done through the Ask the Community tile. So if I'm just going to click on that, and then if I scroll down through the topics, you can pick the product that you want to ask the question about. So as we're talking about personal tax this morning, I'm going to click onto CCH Personal Tax Hyperlink, and you can see there's a discussion going on, and some of them have been answered in green. So a question is posed, and then the answer sits there. So as I scroll down, you can see there are the names and questions, and the other products work in exactly the same way. You raise a question and someone will come back to you with the answer. You can also, let me just nip back into the home page, you can join a group. So if I click onto the groups, you can decide which groups you want to join. There's a number of the products listed there. And the benefit of doing this is once you join the group, you can say how regular you would like notification emails to be sent to you. So this is all discussion based, and it will allow you to provide feedback on the products in the group. You can share updates, include queries, and we can put in attachments. So you would pick, obviously, personal tax in this instance, perhaps become a member of that group, and then you can either have a daily notification, or if you don't like to be bombarded with notifications, you can choose the regularity that you want to see those. But it's all very useful information. In the Our Products tile, under here, on the hyperlink, you can come in here and you can see that there are lots of documents and videos according to which product. So you could go into personal tax. These are our user documents, and you can go in there. So if you can't remember how to do something, for example, within personal tax, you can click in there, go through all the various sections, click on the ellipsis key there, the three dots to expand, and you can see there's lots of detail that you can look in and find out how to do things. Also, just go back to the home screen. If I just close that down, go back onto the home screen, there is also the My Learning portal. And once you go through into that hyperlink, this takes you to the resources where we've got e-learning for you to have a look at. I've clicked on to that option so that you can see what sits behind it. You can see we've got a number of courses in here that you can take in respect to particular products within the CCH suite. So you've got accounts production, central workflow, corporation tax, there's personal tax, there's IXBRL, and you can read the rest. They're all fairly self-explanatory. We update these so according to the products that we've got at present, and so that's quite a useful resource for you to have a look at as well. And lastly, on the tiles, we've also got, if I click onto home, I'll take you back to the previous screen. There we are. The last one is a news tile, and basically this is where Wolters Kluwer Tax and Accounting News Group operate, and they bring you the latest industry news which you may find of interest. Now, along the top of the customer community, you can see you can either click on the tiles or you can click on the links here. Cases, once you go into that one, this is where you can see the queries that you as a practice have raised, and you can see who's dealing with your case, and you can look at your colleagues' cases if they're registered under the same account. You can create a case and you can see the history, and that will only be relevant to the cases that you have raised, so you won't be able to see other customers' cases in there. That will be just specific to your practice. So the last option at the top is more, and under here you can see you can give feedback. You can see our GDPR notice, privacy notice, terms of use, terms of conditions, cookie policy, that sort of thing. And also there is a search facility on the middle of the screen here. And this is where you can ask questions on articles and basically update your knowledge by receiving that information from the system. So it's all done digitally as opposed to telephoning, which is obviously the way forward. Now, I think if I just drop back into my, let's just get back onto the PowerPoint. I'm still in CCH. Here we go, back into the PowerPoint. Click onto that. I think we can now run through some questions because I've covered all the points that I wanted to raise. I'm just going to have a look on the screen here, and I'm also going to ask my colleague Pat Harrison to join me. Pat is with our support department and has many years of experience, so hopefully she can help
Not
me
that many. I'm not that old.
answer some questions. Not that old, no, many years. I
Well,
can't
actually, I
say
probably am.
quite so many. Apologies,
Hello.
Pat.
Hi,
Hello.
everyone. Hello. Um, there was one question from Alice, which I said to Alice I'd ask now so everyone benefits from the answer. Can we go back near the beginning, Morag? You were talking about the Entrepreneur's Relief, and Alice has asked, will the Entrepreneur's Relief screen carry forward numbers to future years?
Right, well, we can actually have a look at that. So let's go back into Central. Oops, let's just see. There we go. Apologies, everyone. I'm having a little bit of trouble getting back into Central. That's not going to let me. The pleasures of using remote technology. Let's see, so I've got my virtual manager. It was doing it all the way through the presentation and now I can't get back in, which is not good. I'm going into my virtual machine, but it's not allowing me to go back into Central. Are there any other questions, Pat, whilst I'm just trying to scramble back into Central?
There is a question about the learning portal under customer community about order automation. Charlotte, I don't know the answer to that one. I'll make a note of it and I'll come back to you afterwards if that's all right. I need to speak to Fred, who's the product specialist for order automation. I don't honestly know at the moment. But I'll
Okay.
let you know.
Thanks, Pat. I've managed to get Central back at long last.
Okay.
Apologies, everyone. Okay, so the question was about the capital gains. So the client that I was looking at was called Mrs. Adams. I'm just going to bring her back up on the screen. So it was Rosemary Adams, and let's just go back into her record, into her tax return. So you remember that we clicked the forestalling rules. So we wanted to know whether it brings the information forward. So if I go into 2020 and into the capital gains tax section of the tax return data area, there we go. So we'll look at the entrepreneur's relief screen. So I've put in the £1 million so that she's got no relief available. So if I close that down and then close the tax return down, I create the new year and just run through the new year tax return wizard. I'm rolling forward the data. Click on finish. So it's creating the return and bringing all the details forward. Seem to have jumped into the Lake Partnership, back into Mrs. Adams. Let's just try that again. Just roll it forward. And there we go, creating the tax return for 20/21. It should come on the screen. Mrs. Adams, I'll go into capital gains. And we'll look at the entrepreneur's relief position. It just keeps the information that we used from the previous year. So yes is the answer. I would say it does roll it forward because the detail is there. Obviously, if these figures were different, it will need to show you. Now, one caveat I would say to that is that obviously, if you've got some entrepreneurs relief that you've already used, when you start to put the client on the system, you do have to come in here and put the amount already used in, as I did during the 1920 tax year where I put the million in there. You would actually have to put some in if they've already had a disposal, perhaps they'd sold a business previously and they've used some of the lifetime limit in any case. I hope that answers your question. Okay, I'm just looking in the question bank to see if there are any more questions. Has anyone else got a question that
So
they'd like to
Bakib asked a general question. Is it going to be possible to access this webinar again later on for future reference? In
Yes,
fact, one
absolutely.
lady had to leave early because she was having a sound issue, so she was hoping for a recording as well.
Yes, the webinar has been recorded and it will be made available to you. It will be circulated to all the attendees soon. Okay.
Okay.
Well, if that's all the questions, I think I've covered everything that I intended to in the webinar. As I say, it has been recorded and you will get a copy of that in the near future. I'd just like to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy schedules to attend this morning. Apologies for the technical difficulties that we had initially. I hope you found the webinar useful, but please don't hesitate to contact us if you've got any queries. And so all that remains is for me to say, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much and goodbye.